All right, I'm going to give a quick rundown of what was a reasonably large project in the far northeast of the state in the Cooper-Eromanga Basin, where we were trying to get some better information on the vegetation mapping of that region. Now, in the past, as Matt mentioned, the vegetation mapping across the state wasn't uniform, and in some parts of the state was totally absent. And in the Cooper-Eromanga Basin, there was a large chunk, 54,000 square kilometres, that had never been mapped. And other parts of the mapping in the neighbouring area were a bit long in the tooth as well. They hadn't been surveyed for 25 years or so. Now, this became a problem for the oil and gas industries, pastoral industries, NRM groups in that area, because they wanted to have reasonably up-to-date and contemporary information on the veg communities and the associated ecology of that area. So we're engaged to fill in those grey spots. The first part was to get the handle on the data from that part of the world, biological survey data, which is the standard collection method from the past. Didn't cover all of the area, so we incorporated new information from the pastoral surveys of lease assessments, assessments made on site for oil and gas exploration and drill well sites, and then identified some gaps where we needed to undertake some more surveys in the area to get a greater representation of the landscapes of that region. We then went to start to look at the relationships between those survey sites and the environmental characteristics of those landscapes, and then use the vegetation survey data to combine it with cover and species composition to identify natural clusters of vegetation types. Classic cluster analysis that is done for vegetation mapping. So from that work we identified 28 ecotypes that covered across that area. We used a range of environmental data on climate, topography, water and vegetation in the longer term, and pastoral landscapes to understand where the grazing impacts were. But to get a handle on some of that finer resolution and change over time story, we also included a stack from the SA land cover set and constricted it to those ones that are most relevant to the region. Obviously there's not too much irrigated pastures up there or orange groves, so we chose particular land cover classes that were relevant for that area. It allowed us to create individual models of the likelihood of those ecotypes that we identified based on their relationships with environmental variables, the land cover layer and soils and so on. And so for each of those ecotypes we come up with a likelihood map, a little akin to the land cover individual likelihood maps. We then can composite those into a unified most likelihood layer of the 28 vegetation types of that region, and it allowed us to start understanding the relationships between a whole heap of other fauna and flora records for that part of the world and each of those different ecotypes and where they were in space. It allowed us to identify a range of important community types, the association between threatened species, wetlands, and also to get a handle on the range of land management issues that might be in that area as well in regards to soil erosion and so on. So we've created all these new information tools, an update and refinement to a large area of that state, which is I guess value adding to the land cover layers, but also combining it with some of the older technologies of vegetation classification for that fine scale work that's more relevant at the ecotype level. All the data has been made available both for the mining industry through the SARAG server and nature maps and for the Department of Environment and Water. All of those data is available on those websites listed. Just look and search for the word Cooper and you should be able to find the report and the accompanying data.